Hello to all my dear followers and be welcome to this great fanfic. Be welcome to the third season of What If Naruto Awakened the magnet release and fell in love with SASUKE. If you don't see the previous seasons, don't forget that you have a playlist with all the videos of this great fanfic. So, like always, if you want more seasons, don't forget to give your like, comment and subscribe for more. So, we gonna start.
Chapter 13. Team Placements. A Mysterious New Teacher. The next morning, Naruto found himself sitting in front of the Hokage once again. This time, thankfully, it was much more pleasant than when he had been there the night before to tell him about Mizuki's frame him for stealing the scroll of seals. Instead, the Hokage was reviewing Naruto's ninja registration. They chatted idly while he made sure everything was filled out right. Everything seems in order, Hiruzen said as he set the registration form down. Well, that was pretty easy, Naruto answered with a smile. Really, the form wasn't anything special. Just the basic information like height and weight, and any important characteristics for potential clients to know. I was debating whether to use my mother's name or not. In the end, I figured it's lasted me this long, it couldn't hurt to keep it for a little longer. Hiruzen hummed in agreement, although Naruto could see a slight hesitance in his eyes. What, is something wrong? He asked. Hiruzen shook his head, although Naruto could tell there was something he wanted to say. No, it's nothing too serious, Hiruzen assured him. There was a bit of concern in the Hokage's eyes nonetheless. I know it's been a year and a half since you lost your grandfather, but with all the changes going on, and your recent visit, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Involuntarily, Naruto felt a lump forming in his throat. He had tried to avoid thinking about his grandfather's death. He swallowed it down with a bit of difficulty. While he wasn't exactly devastated anymore, the wound was still raw. I'm coping well enough. Sometimes I miss him more than others, but for the most part I'm doing okay. In a way, I feel lucky to have known him at all. For all the pain that having him for such a short time has caused, I prefer that to not having known him at all. Besides, at least I can take comfort in the fact I took the time he had left and spent it with him instead of letting him kill himself training me, said Naruto. He smiled softly, remembering his grandfather. There were especially fond memories that last year and a half of picnics along the Naka River with his grandfather and Sasuke, or introducing his grandfather to TV and how much it had frustrated the man to deal with new technology. Hiruzen looked relieved. He let a small smile work its way back onto his face. Good. Just remember, you can come tell me if you're ever having any problems. Sometimes I worry that you push yourself too far with the training and trying to live up to your grandfather's name, he said. After a moment's pause, he said, I just wanted to make sure you don't forget to have fun and make friends. Don't take things too seriously. Sometimes I worry about how much time you spend training. Please, I have you, Sasuke, Old Man Ichiraku and Ayam, not to mention Choji and Shikamaru. I've got all the family and friends I need. I have plenty of fun with them. Naruto protested light-heartedly. The Hokage chuckled lightly. His chuckles died off slowly, and he looked at Naruto with a fond gaze. I suppose that's true. Besides, that work ethic is what will make you a great leader someday. Naruto shifted a little uncomfortably under the praise, and he felt his face heat up a bit. One of his biggest goals was to be Hokage. To have Gramps, the current and possibly greatest Hokage, praise him was nice. In his shifting, he glanced out the window. His eyes widened slightly when he noticed the sun's position in the sky. It was almost midday. He turned to the Hokage with an apologetic look. Anyways, it was nice talking with you, but I better get going. I want to try to get that new jutsu I'm working on ready for combat before team assignments, said Naruto. The two stood up and bid each other goodbye, with Naruto promising to come see Sarutobi soon. On his way out, Naruto bumped into small boy who couldn't have been more than 8. It turned out he was the Hokage's grandson, Konohamaru. He seemed a bit uppity to Naruto. The look on the kid's face when he said he didn't care who he was had been priceless. Despite the boy's insistence that Naruto apologize, he had simply ignored the kid and continued on his way. The next morning, Naruto arrived at the classroom surprisingly late. There were only 15 minutes left before the orientation began. That's what I get for staying up late to train. Yesterday, Naruto had taken a break in his training to go to his favorite sushi place, the Kintako Lounge. It was a slightly fancier place than Ichiraku, though nowhere near as upscale as the restaurants in the capital. When he left, he'd caught the Hokage's grandson tailing him, and the boy had begged him to train him. Naruto resisted at first, but in the end he caved and shown the boy a thing or two. By the time they were finished, it was already evening, but Naruto had tried to get back to perfecting his jutsu anyways. Not only did he not get it done, but by the time he got to bed he was so exhausted that he slept through the first 3 alarms he had set. So here he was, 15 minutes away from being late to his orientation. Naruto quickly caught his bearings and looked around the classroom. Most of those who'd graduated had already arrived, and an almost palpable feeling of excitement was in the air. Some showed their excitement by trying to act as if it was just a normal day, chatting animatedly with their friends. Others had massive grins on their faces, while several groups of girls were gathered in circles, giggling madly. He could even see Shikamaru with his head on his arms in a row in the middle of the room, unbelievably asleep despite all the noise. Naruto couldn't help but shake his head. His lazy friend would never change. But that wasn't the friend he was looking for. He searched through the crowd, looking for a familiar glimpse of blue-tinted ebony hair. Finally, his eyes alighted upon a row halfway up the aisle, where SASUKE sat by one of the large windows on the right side of the room. Nobody was sitting next to her. They'd probably been scared off by her usual cold glare. He made his way up the steps, idly returning the greeting of a couple classmates along the way. "Good morning, Sasuke," he said as he stepped into the row. Sasuke glanced up at him. "HN, good morning, I guess," she greeted back. Naruto smiled as he slid into the seat next to her. As he did, Sasuke took notice of Senbonzakura sheathed at his waist. "That's a nice sword. I didn't even know you had one." She said it as a statement, but he could hear the question in her voice. "Well, they don't exactly let academy students walk around with real swords," Naruto said. "Besides," he gave her a smug smirk he knew would get under her skin. "I am a ninja. You didn't think I showed you everything I know, did you?" "Whatever," she replied. There was the faintest ghost of a smirk on her lips. Sasuke leaned her head against her hand and looked at him calculatingly. "So, speaking of what you know, did you get that jutsu you were working on down?" Naruto nearly groaned in annoyance, though he stopped himself short. She just had to ask about the jutsu. "No, I didn't. Something came up after we left the academy on the day of the exam. I never got the chance to work on it that day, and then yesterday I got stuck babysitting Gramps' grandson. I stayed up late trying to get it down, but it didn't happen," he explained. "So that's why you were almost late. I was wondering about that since you're always early." Naruto detected a slight hint of satisfaction on Sasuke's face as she said that. Although he dreaded the answer, since it meant she would probably hold it over his head for a while, Naruto asked, "What about you? Did you finish the jutsu you were working on?" Even before she said anything, he knew the answer, just from the way she stopped bothering to hide her look of smug satisfaction. "Yeah, I did. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I could definitely use it in a fight." Naruto sighed in resignation. "I guess you win this one," he conceded. He hated losing, although the slight hint of real happiness he could see in Sasuke's eyes, hidden behind all that smugness of course, made him feel slightly better. For a few minutes, they just sat in a comfortable silence as their fellow graduates talked around them. Of course, the happy moment couldn't last forever. It was broken by a loud and obnoxious voice that both were familiar with. "Hey Sasuke, I see you're here already." At the front of the classroom, Kiba was looking up at them. His appearance had gotten even more wild over the years. With his slit eyes and slightly fanged grin, and the hooded gray jacket with a fur ruff, he almost looked like a wolf in human form. Perched on top of his head was Akamaru, a small puppy with white fur, except for its black ears. Kiba walked up the stairs with a confident stride, and took a seat in the row in front of them, turned around backwards. Kiba gave Naruto a brief look of contempt. "Uzumaki," he greeted tersely. Naruto only offered him a small nod, his face set in a stoic mask. He and Kiba didn't really get along. They had started out as friends when they first began the academy after that first spar. The feral boy liked having someone to compete with in taijutsu aside from Sasuke. That started to change as Naruto started to consistently beat Kiba in everything. Kiba liked to think of himself as top dog, and he couldn't stand the fact that he never beat Naruto. It was only when Kiba, like most boys in their class, started to have a crush on Sasuke in their third year, that things really changed. By then Naruto and Sasuke were best friends, and the combination of seeing Naruto always spending time with her and him always beating Kiba had caused the boy to become bitter towards him and basically make it his mission to prove he was better. As soon as he had greeted Naruto, Kiba turned back to Sasuke and gave her a confident grin. "So, after the orientation, you want to go get lunch? My treat," he asked. "No thanks," Sasuke replied with an impassive expression. Although he looked disappointed for a moment, Kiba recovered quickly. Of all Sasuke's admirers, he was the most resilient. Despite receiving rejection after rejection, he never stopped asking her out. "Oh well, maybe some other time," Kiba said with a nonchalant shrug of his shoulders. To Naruto's relief, he decided to turn around and begin to converse with Akamaru. Thank God for small miracles. Naruto spent the rest of the short time remaining in silence, with the small exception of when Ino and Sakura took seats behind them and engaged Naruto in a conversation about his sword. Ino was the heiress of the Yamanaka clan, a slender girl with long, platinum blonde hair in a ponytail and light blue eyes. She was considered by many as one of the prettiest girls in their class, something that was only accentuated by the short purple top and long skirt she wore, which was slit on the sides. Of course, the white bandages she wore around her stomach and upper legs kept it modest. Her friend, Sakura Haruno, was perhaps even more slender than Ino if that was possible. Out of all the girls in their class, she was the least developed. Her most distinguishing physical features were her wide forehead, something she had been teased about when they were younger, and her long pink hair, the same color as the flower blossom that was her namesake. She dressed more modestly, with a red cheapao dress that had slits on the sides and tight-fitting shorts that went to the top of her knees. "Hey, that sword looks pretty cool, Naruto," Ino commented as she leaned forward from behind. Her long blonde hair dangled over the front of the desk. Naruto had to crane his neck around to speak to her, and he was slightly distracted by the sight of her leaning over. Not even he was immune to the looks of a pretty girl, even though he hated to admit it. Beside her, Sakura, who was the more intellectual of the two, leaned forward as well. "Yeah, it does look pretty well made, even sheathed. Where'd you get it?" she asked curiously. Naruto wasn't too surprised she was able to recognize the quality of his sword. While both girls were smart, Sakura was by for the more academic. She excelled at studying and retaining knowledge, though she was rather lacking in the physical department. Ino, on the other hand, was a lot bubblier and more outgoing than Sakura. She'd been the one to break her out of her shell. "Thanks, I'm glad you two appreciate it. It's an heirloom from my grandmother. She had it made by a smith in the land of iron," he told them. Sakura smiled gently. "That's so sweet. It explains why it looks so good, if it's that quality of sword," she said. Beside her, Ino gave him a slightly more flirtatious smile, with her eyes fixed on his face. "It does look pretty nice. You know, I wouldn't mind getting to see more," she said. For some reason, the way she said it made it seem like she wasn't talking about Senbin Sakura. In spite of his training, Naruto felt his face heat up slightly, and he abruptly turned forward to stare at the blackboard, drawing an amused giggle from Ino. Beside him, Sasuke scoffed. He heard her mutter something that sounded strangely like, "Idiot." A few minutes later, Irika poked his head through the door and greeted them. "Hello, is everyone ready to begin?" he asked. Everyone nodded, some voicing their agreement. As he walked to the lectern, Irika gave Naruto a slight nod. They hadn't had a chance to speak since that night a couple days ago. He returned the nod with a slight smile on his face. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Sasuke give him a weird look. "What?" he asked. She stared at him blankly. "Nothing." Once at the lectern, Irika cleared his throat to grab their attention. "Well, before I begin, does anyone have any questions?" One boy at the front of the class, wearing a long-sleeved green shirt, rose his hand. "Yes, Hideo?" Irika asked the boy as he put his hand down. "Yeah, where's Mizuki-sensei? Shouldn't he be here?" he asked. Irika's expression, which had been bright and cheerful, quickly became sober and serious. "I'm afraid that 2 nights ago, it was revealed that Mizuki was a traitor. He was captured and is now being questioned by the torture and interrogation department. Needless to say, he will no longer be an instructor at this academy," he said. Naruto could hear a cold undercurrent to his voice. That's right, they were supposedly friends. I can't imagine what that must be like, he thought. Several people gasped at once, and the room was filled with restless muttering. The idea that an instructor that they had trusted for years was a traitor was obviously shocking for many people. Naruto could even hear a few that seemed to think it must be a mistake. In the chaos, Sasuke nudged his arm to get his attention. 2 nights ago, this wouldn't happen to have anything to do with that little thing that came up and prevented you from training, would it? She asked, her eyebrow raised. Naruto quickly looked around to make sure no one had heard her. He was relieved to see that even Kiba, with his sharp ears, was too immersed in his own shock. He leaned in close and hissed, "Yes, but not here. I'll tell you all about it later," he promised. Sasuke seemed satisfied with his answer and nodded in assent. With a pleased smirk, he heard her mutter, "Good boy," out of the corner of her mouth. He couldn't help but roll his eyes. She loved to try and get under his skin. Eventually, Irika let loose a loud whistle and drew the attention of the class once more. "I realize this is quite shocking, but I can't tell you any more about the matter. It's been deemed classified. Now, if that's all the questions, let's get back to the reason we're here. Today is about you, and you shouldn't allow this situation disturb that," he said. Once he was sure all the attention was back on him, Irika cleared his throat and began his prepared lecture. "All right, since everyone's here, we can begin. First of all, I want to congratulate you all on becoming ninja. You've all trained very hard, and now you're finally ready to begin duty. But your journey has only just begun. Because you're only starting out as ninja, you'll each be placed into squads of 3. Each squad will be led by a jonin, elite ninja with advanced skills. They will help you mature into the fine ninja I know you all can be." Irika smiled proudly at them all. Many of the students began to murmur about this. It was the first the instructors had mentioned squads, and only a few of them knew about it beforehand, Naruto being one of them. He saw Sasuke giving him an annoyed look. "Did you know about this?" she mouthed. Naruto shrugged. "Yes," he mouthed back. She gave him a light scowl. "We better end up on the same team, and the other person better not slow us down, or I'm gonna kick your ass for not telling me." She finished without bothering to mouth the words this time. Hopefully she isn't too serious about that. Although he knew that she was mostly joking about kicking his ass, Naruto couldn't help but wonder if she really believed a team would weigh her down. He'd like to think that he had had more of an impact on her. "It doesn't matter." Naruto shook his head. "She'll come around eventually." Irika waited for the murmuring to die down before he began to list the teams. "I will now call out your teams." Irika held up a clipboard. He began to rattle off names, ignoring the reactions of the genin. Some complained about not being on teams with someone they wanted to be on. Others were ecstatic to be with a certain friend. Naruto ignored it for the large part, waiting impatiently for his team to be announced. Finally, Irika got to Team 7 and he heard his name. Next up is Team 7 under Kakashi Hatake. Team 7 will be Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto smirked slightly. Sasuke Uchiha, Sasuke, not one to show emotion, turned away with a huff of annoyance at the playful one-armed hug he gave her. And Sakura Haruno. Naruto half expected Kiba to get upset over the decision, but surprisingly he stayed quiet. Irika quickly began naming the last few teams. It was pretty clear he was eager to get them done. This probably was his least favorite part of being an academy instructor, what with various people complaining about their teams. Team 8, under Kurenai Yuhi, will be Kiba Inuzuka, Hinata Hyuga, and Shino Aburame. Naruto silently nodded at that one. They all had tracking skills and each brought something unique to the table. Kiba, a potential heavy assault member, Hinata, who brought her clan's deadly taijutsu and possible future medical skills to the table, and last but not least, Shino. Naruto respected the quiet bug user more than most. Behind the high-collared coat and small sunglasses he wore was a sharp and skilled mind. He would be perfect for laying out plans for the team. Team 9 turned out to be some of the lesser-known students, few, if any, of which Naruto suspected would make it past the second test. The final team, Team 10, was fairly obvious even before Irika announced it. Not just because they were the only 3 left. Finally, Team 10, under Asuma Sarutobi, Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akimichi. Irika finished. He set down his clipboard and addressed them as a group once more. You'll now have 2 hours for lunch. After that, your Jonin senseis will come pick you up. One last time, I'd like to say how proud I am of all of you. With that, Irika excused himself. After he left, several students began filtering out to go get lunch. Naruto looked over at Sasuke and caught her eye. So, you want to go get lunch? Maybe Ichiraku's? He asked. I guess. You can explain this whole team thing to me, and why you never mentioned it, she said. Naruto nodded in agreement to her condition. Fair enough. Together they stood up and began to make their way out of the classroom. They just reached the door of the classroom when Sakura came running up behind them. Hey guys, she called to get their attention. Do you mind if I join you, since, we're a team and all? Sakura asked nervously. Naruto shrugged. I don't mind, he said. He then turned to Sasuke and raised an eyebrow in question. What about you? Sasuke huffed and looked away. Whatever, she said dismissively and began walking away. Well, I guess that settles it, Naruto said with a cheerful smile. He saw Sakura's dejected look at Sasuke's reaction and patted her on the shoulder. Don't worry, she won't bite. You've just got to get her to warm up to you is all. Now come on, we're going to this ramen stand I like. You'll love it, he said. Sakura nodded shyly and followed him out of the room. They caught up to Sasuke further down the hall, who only gave them a glance to acknowledge their presence. To anyone that would have seen them, Naruto was sure they would have found them as an odd group. The girl that was cold to everyone, the boy that was serious about training and shockingly goofy, but the adults seemed to hate, and one of the most cheerful girls in the academy who most thought was a bookworm. We certainly are an odd group. They made it all the way to the courtyard before the Ninetales growled inside his mind. It was the first time he'd spoken that day. Grr, I smell mutt. You better watch yourself. No sooner had he given his warning than Kiba's obnoxious voice rang out from behind them. Hey, Uzumaki, he yelled. Naruto sighed in annoyance. Reluctantly, he turned around to face him. Kiba was flanked on both sides by his teammates, neither of which seemed like they really wanted a part of this. Shino was his usually silent self. He just stood in the background without saying anything, his signature large overcoat and sunglasses in place. Naruto idly noted that with that silent demeanor, and his size which matched his own, Shino would likely make a good bodyguard. On Kiba's right, Hinata Hyuga stood nervously poking her fingers together. Hinata was a shy girl, with her purple-tinted hair cut short in a Heim-style cut, and she had a tendency to wear a baggy hooded sweatshirt. Yes, Kiba, what is it you want? Naruto asked impatiently. He fixed Kiba with one of his most stoic stares, something he had learned from his grandfather to intimidate people. Although it didn't seem Kiba was affected, his dog, Akamaru, gave a whimper. Naruto had learned that the little dog was much better at sensing chakra than his partner, and he could obviously sense the difference in their reserves. Although Kiba was no slouch, he was nowhere near Naruto's level of reserves. Heedless of his partner's apprehension, Kiba stepped forward boldly. I just wanted to let you know that you might have been the best in the academy, but now we're ninja, and that doesn't mean anything. I will prove I'm the best, he declared. Is that all? Naruto asked, unimpressed by Kiba's bravado. Even if he had a slight point about the academy not meaning much in the long view, Kiba growled and made to step forward as if he wanted to fight. But Hinata spoke up in a quiet stutter. I don't think we should start a fight right now, Kiba. Shouldn't we go get lunch, so we can meet our sensei on time? I agree. Why? Because you'll gain nothing from a schoolyard brawl, and it will endanger our reputation with our sensei if something happens and we're late. Shino said. While Kiba was distracted by his teammates, Naruto subtly placed his hand on the hilt of Senbonzakura and slid his left foot backwards, in case Kiba disregarded his teammates and attacked. For a moment, it looked as if he would. Kiba stood there and glared at Naruto. Tension began to build. Surprisingly, Kiba suddenly stepped back and huffed dismissively. Whatever. Just know that one of these days I'm going to beat you. Kiba turned on his heel and began to head for one of the other entrances to the academy. But he made sure to bump into Naruto roughly as he passed. Sorry? Hinata said. She bowed her head in apology for her teammate, and then rushed after him, followed closely behind by a silent Shino. Naruto slowly relaxed his stance and took a deep breath. Man, that guy really gets on my nerves. I hope he continues to push your buttons. I like it when you destroy people. Ninetales supplied not so helpfully, although it did diffuse the rest of the tension. Naruto couldn't help but shake his head at the fox's blood-thirsty nature. He turned around and saw his teammates looking at him. Sakura seemed worried, while Sasuke seemed indifferent, and just raised her eyebrow at him, as if to say, well, come on, let's go get some ramen. Without another word, he began walking away, with them following behind him. As Naruto left the courtyard with his teammates, his thoughts shifted to his sensei. I wonder what he'll be like. He'd heard a lot about how skilled the man was from the Hokage and was curious if it was true. Naruto found out one thing about his new sensei soon after lunch. The man wasn't a fan of being on time at all. He had only just picked them up 10 minutes ago, after making them wait for 4.5 hours. This guy better not be late all the time, or I'm going to use Senbonzakura to shred that stupid book of his. Naruto vowed to himself. Kakashi sat across from Naruto and his teammates, leaning against the railing lining the roof. So, now that we're all here, why don't we introduce ourselves? Asked Kakashi nonchalantly. Naruto looked at him coldly. If he didn't know about the man's reputation, he would have never believed this apparently lazy man was a high-level ninja. He didn't strike a very imposing figure. In a way, he reminded Naruto of a scarecrow. Tall and lean, with a shock of gravity defying silver hair, and a single eye lazily reading a small orange book in his hand. What do you want to know? Asked Sakura. He shrugged. Like, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, that sort of stuff. He answered. How about you go first, sensei? Suggested Naruto. He was curious to see what the silver-haired man would choose to say about himself. Kakashi looked up from his book and shrugged. Sure, why not? He said. My name is Kakashi Hatake. What I like and what I hate. I don't want to talk about it. Dreams for the future? Haven't really thought about it. As for hobbies, I have lots of hobbies. There was silence after the underwhelming introduction. Now your turn, on the left, said Kakashi, pointing at Sakura. My name's Sakura Haruno. The things I like books, my parents, and Ino. I also admire Sasuke because she's so strong. Sakura answered, looking over at Sasuke, who steadfastly ignored her. Things I hate? I can't really think of anything, except for people who make fun of my forehead. Reading is my only real hobby. My dream for the future. Sakura paused and looked down in thought. I want to become a strong and beautiful kunoichi, so nobody will ever make fun of me again. I also want to have a family. Naruto looked at Sakura carefully, something he noted Kakashi doing as well. It seems she has some self-esteem issues still. That's something that'll need to be worked on, especially if Sasuke is going to respect her. Though Sasuke herself would be an issue. Alright, thanks for that. Next, you, Ms. Broody, said Kakashi, pointing at Sasuke to Naruto's right. It took all his willpower not to snort in amusement. He just had to poke the proverbial bear, or in this case, tiger. My name is Sasuke Uchiha, she growled, trying to kill him with her glare alone. Naruto thought she looked rather cute when she was mad. I don't have very many things I like, except for Naruto and tomatoes, she said. But I hate a lot of things. Dreams? I guess you could say I have a couple. She shifted uncomfortably. She looked a bit embarrassed to Naruto. He almost missed the first part of what she said, because it was said so quietly. I want to be an even greater kunoichi than my mother and rebuild my clan. As for the second, Sasuke grit her teeth and all traces of embarrassment were gone. She glared a dark, murderous glare. It's not a dream, for I will make it a reality. I'm going to kill a certain someone. Naruto frowned. For a second, he had seen a glimpse of the kinder side of Sasuke that he only rarely got to see. Seeing that kindness so quickly enveloped by rage and hate left him sad. It seemed almost unnatural for a girl that had once been so kind to have such a darkness in her. Kakashi cleared his throat. Okay. On that happy note, he said sarcastically. Kakashi squinted at Naruto. You look different than expected. What's with the roots? Did you do something to your hair? He asked dumbly. Naruto's eye twitched in annoyance. Was Kakashi ever serious? He shook his head. Oh well, then go ahead with your introduction. Naruto looked at Kakashi strangely, but spoke, nonetheless. He spoke in the same calm manner he had since he had entered the classroom that day. My name is Naruto. I like sushi, training, and Sasuke and Gramps. Sasuke looked away at his admission with a huff of annoyance. Naruto closed his eyes briefly. I hate spicy foods, bad sushi, and idiots. He ignored the raised eyebrows at that last comment. As for my dreams for the future, I have several. Kakashi's eyebrow rose so high it threatened to disappear underneath his forehead protector. Several dreams? Care to share any of them? Naruto shrugged. I suppose I could, he said. Naruto steepled his hands in front of his face. Like Sasuke, my dreams aren't just dreams, but ambitions. I want to restore my clan to prominence and become the first from my clan to be Hokage. That comment earned him curious looks from all his team members, even Sasuke, who he hadn't mentioned being part of a clan to. He hesitated before sharing his last dream. I'd also like to help a certain someone with some issues. He glanced at Sasuke out of the corner of his eye, something that seemed to go unnoticed by everyone else. All right, good. Seems you're all unique with your own ideas. We'll have our first mission tomorrow, said Kakashi. He folded his arms. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man. Mission? He must be talking about the second Genin test. I wonder what kind he'll use. He wondered. Sakura and Sasuke, who he knew had no idea what was going on, looked at Kakashi curiously. What's the mission, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked. It's a task that the four of us will be doing together. Kakashi said vaguely. What kind of task? A survival exercise, Kakashi answered. Survival training? What kind of test was Kakashi planning? What? Survival training? We did that in the academy. I thought we were supposed to start real missions now. Not more practice. Sakura protested. Her sentiments were shared by Sasuke. Naruto could almost feel the annoyance radiating off of her. She glared at Kakashi even more than when he had called her Ms. Broody. Kakashi wasn't fazed by Sakura and Sasuke's annoyance. This is not like your previous training, he said mysteriously. Sasuke grunted in annoyance. TCH. Then what kind of training is it? She asked rudely. Kakashi began to chuckle. It wasn't a normal chuckle, but a slightly malicious one that set Naruto on edge and caused the hairs on the back of his neck to raise. Hey, that's a normal question, Sakura protested. What's so funny? Kakashi's chuckles simply escalated to full-blown laughter. Naruto grit his teeth in annoyance. Kakashi was beginning to get on his nerves. He could tell his teammates were feeling the same. It looked like Sasuke was about to attack the man. If I tell you the answer, you're not going to like it, he said ominously. Kakashi looked at them seriously. Out of the 27 graduates who just came out of the academy, only 9 of you will actually be accepted as genin. The rest will be eliminated and sent back to the academy, Kakashi told them. Sakura and Sasuke's eyes bulged in shock. In other words, this is a make-it-or-break-it test with a 66% chance of failure. See? Look at your faces. I told you that you wouldn't like it. What? Shrieked Sakura. We worked hard to graduate, you can't just send us back. What about the test we just took? Was that for nothing? She protested. Although his teammates were even more enraged than ever, Kakashi's words were like a bucket of cold water to him. It helped him calm down and begin thinking. He'd already known about the test, so it was no big shock. What was surprising was the way Kakashi described how it worked. While it was true only a select amount of genin would make it through, it was nowhere near as low as he was saying. After all, there were other classes, even if it was rare for more than 2 full classes to make it to the 7th year without dropping out. So why was the man telling them their chances, almost tauntingly? It suddenly hit him like a brick to the face. He's playing mind games, trying to get us off our guard. But why? Either way, he knew he had to try to counter Kakashi's mind games, because they could seriously mess with their chances. Before Kakashi could speak, Naruto answered Sakura's question for him. "Don't you see?" he said. "That was just to see which of us had the potential to be genin. This is the real test," he said grimly. His teammates gaped at his calm answer. Kakashi nodded to him thankfully. "How can you be so calm about this, Naruto?" asked Sakura. He shrugged. Although he wasn't sure what it was, he was determined that they would pass. "I'm calm because no matter what, we will be among those 9 genin," he said simply, trying to reassure his teammates. Naruto looked at Kakashi pointedly. "No matter what kind of mind games or tricks this guy plays, we shouldn't let them get to us. Let me assure you." Naruto looked at his teammates confidently, and then he turned to look at Kakashi intensely. His last message was more for him than Sasuke and Sakura. "We will become genin. Underestimating us will be your downfall." Kakashi met his gaze and looked at him shrewdly. At the same time, he could feel his teammates' gazes on him as well. But for now, he focused solely on Kakashi. "All right then. You're to meet at the training ground 3 tomorrow at 6 a.m., Kakashi ordered. Naruto nodded in understanding alongside his teammates. Their sensei stood and turned to leave. At the last moment, he turned back and spoke, as if he just remembered. "Oh yeah, and I'd suggest you skip breakfast. If you eat, you'll just puke it up later." The man ignored the disgusted looks on the girls' faces and waved merrily. "Well, see you later," he said, disappearing in a puff of smoke. The 3 students sat silently following his departure. Naruto was deep in thought about the Jonin. Kakashi made it seem like he was a lazy lout, but he was far from it. All of his actions today had been meant to manipulate them for the test. And this thing about breakfast is the coup de grace. He wants us to be as worn down as possible to make passing and grasping what we need to do harder. No doubt he'll be late as well, Naruto concluded. But why? Although deep in thought, Naruto stood and looked at his teammates. Well, that was certainly interesting. "There's more to Kakashi than meets the eye," he said. "More than meets the eye? Come on, the man's an idiot." Sasuke scoffed in disbelief. Naruto chuckled. "Come on, don't tell me you didn't notice it. The man was deliberately taunting us. That entire speech was one big mind game. He wants us off our games for the test," he explained. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock. After a minute of thought, she suddenly scowled in annoyance. "I guess you have a point. I didn't notice that." For the first time since Kakashi left, Sakura spoke up, her tone nervous. "So then what are we supposed to do?" she asked. Naruto shrugged. "I'm not exactly sure yet. We'll have to wait until the test to come up with a better plan," he replied. "Until then, I suggest you ignore his warning about not eating. He just wants us to be even weaker. I bet he'll even wait a few hours until he arrives, so we'll be starving by the time the test begins." Once he saw his teammates had acknowledged what he said, he finished by saying, "Well, I'm going to go train. I'll see you guys tomorrow." As he left, he made sure to catch Sasuke's eye, and once he was sure he had her attention, mouthed "usual place." He saw her nod in reply. With one last wave, he vanished in a blur of speed, leaving nothing but a quiet whisper of wind in his wake. Chapter 14. The Bell Test, Team 7 forms. An hour after leaving his teammates on the academy rooftop, Naruto found himself sitting in his usual place atop the Hokage monument. On either side of him, the spiky protrusions of his father's hair rose like small spires. The evening wind blew his hair about his face. It was his favorite time of day to sit up here and watch the village. Behind him, he heard the sound of dirt crunching underfoot. He didn't have to turn around to know who it was. "I assume you want some answers? It sure has been an odd day," he commented. Sasuke nodded as she took a seat beside him. She crossed her legs and stared at him intently. So, how much did you know about this whole team thing? She asked. I would have thought that you'd want to know about Mizuki first, he said with a small smirk. When Sasuke gave him a warning look, he threw up his hands in defeat. Whoa, easy, I'll tell you. Naruto looked out across the village to collect his thoughts. I knew they would separate us into teams after we graduated, and that we'd be assigned a Jonin sensei. I even knew about the second test. He admitted he could practically feel the burn of the glare she gave him. Why didn't you tell me? She asked accusingly. I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't like it. Like you said, you were never good at teamwork. You don't like people. Plus, it was funny to see your reaction. He answered with a cheeky grin. Sasuke looked away with a huff. TCH, whatever. Still, I'm telling you, Sakura is going to slow us down. She barely passed the physical part of the test. Naruto hummed in agreement. You're not wrong about that. She'll probably be a hindrance at first, but that can change. I expect they put her with us so we could pick up the slack while she catches up. You have to remember she doesn't have the advantages you and I had of having advanced training. He explained. I guess I get it, Sasuke said grudgingly. It clearly still didn't sit well with her being paired with someone she viewed as weak. She recovered quickly though, and suddenly looked up at him with a gleam in her eye. So, tell me about this thing with Mizuki, she demanded. He almost chuckled in amusement. Oh, that. It all started after we parted ways a couple nights ago. Naruto began. He explained to her how Mizuki had tried to frame him for stealing the scroll of seals, and he'd caught him in the act, although he left a couple parts out. By the end, she seemed to be in disbelief, though he certainly wasn't expecting the question she asked. So let me get this straight. You have a sword that enhances your magnet style, and you never told me? She asked. Naruto almost let his mouth fall open. Seriously, that's what you got out of the story about Mizuki trying to frame me? You want to know why I have the sword? He asked. Sasuke shrugged. Mizuki's an idiot, big surprise. I don't really get away with it, but then again, I don't really care. She replied. Her eyes narrowed dangerously though. Don't think that deflection worked. You know I don't like you to go easy on me. If I'm going to kill Itachi, I need to be able to go against the best at their best. So why didn't you tell me? Sasuke pinned him with intense black eyes, one eyebrow quirked. For several moments their eyes locked in a stare down. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. Internally, he felt very torn. Part of him wanted desperately to just tell her the truth. The secrets ate away at him every time he thought about them. The problem is, there was an even larger part that feared telling her the truth. Sasuke had trust issues. He was the only person she really trusted anymore. If she lost that, it might push her over the edge. It could drive her towards the darkness inside he was trying to save her from. Naruto didn't think he could live with himself if it did. Not to mention, there was the issue of her becoming a target if the truth of his heritage got out. I can't risk it, not yet. Just a little longer. I have to keep up the lie just a little longer. I can't tell you the entire reason yet, he said quietly. What the hell are you talking about? Does this have something to do with your parents? Asked Sasuke. Even though she seemed relatively calm, he could see the anger lurking behind her eyes. The wrong thing said here could set her off. Look, I can't really explain why I didn't tell you. All I can say is that it's not the only secret I have, but I can't tell you those either. For now, I hope you can accept the fact that I just can't go all out against you, because it would involve revealing those secrets, and that could quite literally put my life and the life of everyone close to me in danger if they get out too soon, he said. As he spoke, he tried to convey his sincerity not just with his words but his eyes. She gave him with the angriest scowl he'd directed at him from her. After a few tense moments, she finally let out a giant exhale of breath and her look softened. All right, I'll deal with it for now. But just know that I'm going to become so strong you don't have a choice but to fight all out against me, she declared with a fire appearing in her eyes. Naruto smiled softly at his best friend. I look forward to it. For several more hours they stayed there and chatted. When the sun finally set, they parted ways to their respective homes. so they could prepare for tomorrow's test. The sun had just barely begun to rise when Naruto got to the designated training ground. Dim early morning light filled the air, and the calls of birds going merrily about their business sounded all around. Unlike the clearing he and his grandfather used near their house, this one was much more wide open with younger trees. The ground was mostly dirt and grass, with a swift stream near the other side of the clearing. His two teammates were already there, leaning against a tree as they waited for their sensei. "Good morning," he greeted them. Sasuke lifted her head up and nodded at him. "HN morning. Hey, how's it going?" Sakura replied back. "I'm doing fine. So, did you take my advice and eat a good breakfast?" Naruto asked. To his relief, both girls nodded. He had been certain that Sasuke would, but he'd been a little iffy on Sakura. She seemed like she might be the type to go on one of those diets where you skipped meals. Without much else to do, Naruto went and sat against one of the trees, though not before pulling out a scroll on chakra shape manipulation and began to read. He was a paragraph in when Sakura decided to ask a question. "Hey, so what do you think this survival exercise is?" she asked. Naruto lowered his scroll and thought about the question. I think it's fair to assume Kakashi is going to be the opponent. We also know that he didn't want us to eat," he reasoned. "That combined with the fact that he's not here yet, meaning he'll probably be late, makes me believe that whatever he has in mind, he wants us thoroughly worn down and tired before we even begin, whether it's physically or mentally. Other than that, I couldn't tell you," he explained. His teammates nodded at his assessment, though it seemed to have Sakura on edge. By 8 o'clock, Naruto had finished his scroll on chakra shape manipulation, and it had become abundantly clear that Kakashi would probably be as late as the day before. With that in mind, Naruto unsealed a couple bento boxes from his left arm guard. At the questioning looks of his teammates, Naruto offered a shrug of his shoulders. "I'm guessing Kakashi isn't going to be here for a couple more hours. I figured that might happen, so I brought these," he said, raising the boxes, "to keep our strength up. I've got some onigiri for Sakura." Naruto paused to hand the box in his left hand to Sakura, and then turned to Sasuke, who he noticed had a hungry gleam in her eye. Clearly, she'd already caught the scent of the contents. And of course, grilled tomatoes and rice for Sasuke. As soon as he said tomatoes, the box was snatched from his hands. Naruto watched in amusement as she ripped off the lid and began to devour the tomatoes. Just as amusing as the sight of the normally stoic Sasuke acting so strange was the look on Sakura's face when she saw how Sasuke was acting. He leaned towards her ear and, in a conspiratorial whisper, said, "Tomatoes are her favorite. She can't resist them. Funny how much she changes when she's presented with them." Sakura could only nod numbly. After a minute of staring, she finally shook her head and gave Naruto a confused look. "Thanks for the food, but what about you?" she asked. Naruto chuckled and unsealed a third box from his arm guard. He pulled off the lid and showed her the contents, an assortment of raw fish and vegetables. "Kaira shizushi," he said simply, without any other explaining. He pulled out a pair of chopsticks from the box and dug into his snack. At his side, Sakura began to daintily eat the 3 onigiri he'd made her. After the food was consumed, the next couple hours were spent in a comfortable silence. Naruto took to reading another scroll, while Sakura pulled out a book of her own and began reading. Sasuke passed her time by using the training post to do target practice. Naruto had nearly finished his scroll when Kakashi finally arrived at 10 o'clock. He didn't make a flashy entrance. True to his seemingly lax nature, he simply appeared in front of them and waved pleasantly. "Hey there. Is everyone ready for today's test?" A visible vein throbbed on Sakura's forehead. Naruto could tell she was barely restraining herself from yelling at him for being so late. Instead, she settled for a more sedate, yet still peeved, "Hey, you're late." Kakashi chuckled sheepishly. "Yes. Well, a black cat crossed my path, so I had to take the long way around," Kakashi explained. Naruto, along with his teammates, stared at Kakashi in disbelief. That was the most blatantly false excuse he had ever heard. He could at least put some effort into it. "Anyways, since everyone is here, Let's get started, Kakashi said, getting their attention. He walked over to the center training post and placed an alarm clock on top. A soft jingling sound rang out as he pulled a pair of bells from the pouch on his hip. The test is simple. To pass, you have to get one of these bells from me before noon when that timer goes off, he explained. But sensei, there's only 2 bells there. There's no way we can all pass, Sakura observed. In the back of his mind, Naruto began to get an inkling of Kakashi's plan, even as the man began to chuckle ominously. Well, of course. This way, one of you is guaranteed to fail. The ones who get a bell pass and get to have lunch. The one who fails will be sent back to the academy and will have to go hungry, Kakashi said, his tone harsh and cold, while Sakura and Sasuke were shook up, and in Sasuke's case, angry. Naruto narrowed his eyes at his sensei. His grandfather had forced him to train his mind as much as his body. Part of that was all types of strategy. So that's his game, huh? Try to divide us to see if we can put our differences aside and work together. Kakashi had picked the perfect plan to try and divide them. He'd probably done this to several teams. Teams which hadn't had the benefit of a full stomach and good sleep. Although he was slightly concerned, he hardened his resolve. He was confident he could get Sasuke and Sakura to work together with him, even if it did take some convincing. So, any questions before we get started? Asked Kakashi. Sakura rose her hand hesitantly. Kakashi smiled at her and said, Yes, Sakura? If we use kunai and shuriken, won't we hurt you? She asked. Kakashi chuckled and waved a hand dismissively. Naruto himself was surprised at her question. Perhaps she needed to learn more besides just academic knowledge. Oh, don't worry. Your attacks'll probably be too pathetic to hurt me anyways. Naruto was mildly surprised Kakashi didn't spontaneously combust from the glares Sasuke and Sakura leveled at him. He could see that Sasuke was straining not to reach for her kunai pouch. Now, if there aren't any more questions, we'll start on my mark, Kakashi told them. A tenseness fell over them, and Naruto felt his heartbeat quicken. He tensed his leg muscles in preparation to spring away as soon as Kakashi gave the signal to start. His teammates did the same. Kakashi let their apprehension build. He took turns staring at them with a surprising seriousness in his one eye. Finally, he gave the word. Start. Before the word had even fully dropped from Kakashi's lips, Naruto latched on to his teammate's shoulders and used a body flicker to disappear, though not before leaving a few presents for Kakashi. When he had taken his teammates by the shoulder, Naruto took them to a small clearing a little ways away from the main training ground. It was little more than a small gap in between trees, barely 10 feet in diameter, but it was plenty enough to sit and plan, and it was far enough away that Kakashi wouldn't be able to hear them. He, or rather, his clones, had found it the night before when he had them scout the training ground. By his estimation, if the man was going to be gracious enough to tell them where they were training, he might as well take advantage and prepare for it. They appeared in a whisper of displaced wind. Immediately, he had to cover Sakura's mouth, as she was about to scream in surprise. It came as a barely muffled squeak. Once he was sure it was over, he placed a finger in front of his lips to tell her to be quiet. Are you done yet? We have to be careful how loud we are, so we don't give away our position, he told her. Sakura nodded, though she was clearly confused. Once he was sure she wouldn't scream, he removed his hand. As soon as he did, she asked a question. What's going on? Why did you bring us here? Beside her, Sasuke nodded in agreement and gave him with an annoyed look. I'd like to know that too. I don't have time to waste. I have to get one of those bells. You know how important it is I become a ninja, she said. Before he could reply, an explosion shook the forest. Boom! It was pretty clear that it had come from the direction they'd just come from. The loud noise caused Sasuke to tense and whip out a kunai, while Sakura made to scream. He had to quickly slap his hand over Sakura's mouth again, so she wouldn't give away their position. What the hell was that? Sasuke hissed. Naruto shrugged and gave the girls a smirk. I left a few clones to keep Kakashi busy while we talk, he said. He then gave them a serious look. I know you both want to pass, which is why I brought you here. You'd just be wasting your time trying to get those bells. It's not the point of this test, he said. While Sakura looked at him like he was an idiot, Sasuke simply rose her eyebrow as if to say, "Go on. What do you mean?" "He just said that we have to get a bell to pass," Sakura said. Naruto gave her and Sasuke a pointed look. This coming from the man who tried to trick us into being tired and hungry for this test? He asked. "We're ninja now, you can't take everything at face value." Sakura looked a little embarrassed at the comment. Sasuke, meanwhile, nodded in understanding. Honestly, he was pleasantly surprised she seemed fairly cooperative. Still, that didn't mean she was just going to follow him without question. "How do you know the bells aren't the point, though?" Sasuke asked. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "I already told you last night, the Hokage put this team together for a reason. He wouldn't allow a test that would ruin that balance," he said. She gave a thoughtful nod. "I guess a good point," she admitted grudgingly. "So if the bells aren't the real point, what is? Think about it. Everything Kakashi has done has been to drive us apart. He wanted us to be so tired and hungry that we'd ignore the most obvious way of getting the bells. This isn't a test of strength, it's of cooperation," he explained. "Huh?" Sakura asked eloquently. Naruto gave her an amused grin. "What, you don't think he'd honestly expect us to be able to get a bell on our own, right? Kakashi has been a jonin for longer than we've been alive. No, the point of this test is for us to put aside our individual needs to accomplish the goal of taking the bells." Great. A test designed to make me use my worst skill," Sasuke griped. She turned to Naruto and fixed him with a hard stare. "Are you sure this is the point? What happens if you're wrong?" she asked. He could see how much effort it was taking for her to entertain the idea of working with Sakura so quickly. She might have been, barely, willing to put her chance at making genin in his hands, but to do it for Sakura was clearly a struggle for her. "I'm sure of it," he said confidently. "Besides, if I'm wrong, you too can have the bells. I won't let you fail because of my mistake." For a few seconds, there was tense silence as the girls thought over what he said. While Sakura seemed to have accepted his explanation, Sasuke sat there with a blank look on her face. Finally, she let out an explosive sigh and slumped forward. "Fine, we'll work together," she said. Then she looked at him intently. "I assume you have a plan?" Naruto nodded and gave an internal sigh of relief. "Yes, I'll start off by engaging Kakashi one-on-one. I'll get him focused solely on me. Meanwhile, I'll have a pair of clones with you who can tell you when it's time to start the plan. While I'm fighting Kakashi, you—" Here he stopped and looked at Sakura. "We'll set traps around the clearing. My clone will help you set them up, so they'll drive Kakashi forward. Understand?" Sakura nodded. "Yeah, I understand." He then turned to Sasuke, who was looking at him with a raised eyebrow. "What about me?" Despite the situation, he couldn't help but smirk maliciously. "Your job will be to wait until the signal, and then jump in and do a fire jutsu. I'll provide some wind to increase it. Then Sakura will spring her trap and force him towards us so we can engage him directly. We know how the other person fights pretty well, so we should be able to put him on the back foot long enough to get the bells." He replied. "So, does everyone understand their role?" he asked. Sakura and Sasuke both nodded. Naruto smirked. "All right, then let's go." When Naruto reached the clearing, he alighted on the branch of a tree silently and quickly took cover so that Kakashi wouldn't spot him. From the memories of his clones, he knew Kakashi had finished them off early. Now, the silver-haired Jonin had pulled out a small orange book, and he was reading it avidly. He recognized the book, and he wasn't exactly the biggest fan. He took a brief moment to create a pair of clones, who he sent off to find Sakura and Sasuke, and then returned his focus to Kakashi. Now seemed like the perfect time to make his move. Naruto abandoned his cover by standing up. He formed the snake seal and opened his mouth wide. "Lightning style. False darkness," he whispered. "Crom." The reaction was instantaneous. A fierce crackling beam of lightning burst forth from his mouth, shaped like a spear, and aimed right for Kakashi's book. It didn't have quite as much power as he would have liked, but that came with the territory since he hadn't done the nature training for lightning, and it wasn't one of his affinities. For a moment, Naruto thought the attack might actually hit. It was not to be, though. At the last second, Kakashi stepped to the side and pulled his book out of harm's way. The beam flew wide and impacted into the ground, gouging a fist-sized hole several feet deep. Naruto didn't let his attack's failure faze him. He drew Senbonzakura from its sheath and blasted down the tree in a blur of motion. In less than a second, he had moved in on Kakashi. He tried to slash him from shoulder to hip, but Kakashi reacted swiftly. He spun around and whipped out a kunai. The Jonin braced himself and blocked the blow of Naruto's full-sized katana with the small blade. Naruto rolled with the block. He ducked down and swiped at the bells hanging from Kakashi's jacket. Kakashi's one good eye widened in surprise, and he leapt away swiftly. When they were separated, Kakashi regarded him with a shrewd gaze. "You're awfully skilled with that sword," he remarked. "I'm curious, where'd you learn that lightning jutsu?" "It's rather difficult to master," Kakashi asked, lazily reading his book while keeping his eye on Naruto. Naruto began to chuckle. Kakashi frowned and said, "What? Did I say something funny?" "He. Yes, you did," said Naruto, a mysterious grin on his lips. "Why would I tell you my secrets in the middle of battle?" he asked rhetorically. "But learning jutsu isn't my only skill," he said, feeling like a cat about to eat a particularly juicy canary. Quick as a flash, he stabbed Senbonzakura into the ground and sped through a series of hand seals, ending on dragon. "I'm also very good at creating and modifying jutsu." Kakashi's eyes widened just as he unleashed his jutsu. "Six-rod light prison," he muttered, pointing his index finger at Kakashi. It pulsed with a yellow light that then launched at his opponent. Along the way it split apart. 6 beams of pale yellow light shot towards Kakashi. They enlarged into 6 slivers, wide and flat. They pierced Kakashi in the sides and produced a small cloud of smoke. Naruto frowned. That's not a reaction of the light prison. He must have used a substitution. His suspicions were confirmed when the smoke cleared and revealed a log being suspended by his jutsu. "Very interesting. Your file said you were skilled, but it didn't mention anything about this. Someone's been holding out." Naruto spun on his heel. He snatched up Senbonzakura as he turned and held it up defensively. Kakashi was leaning up against a tree and reading his book. I suppose I won't be able to read Aika against you," he said regretfully. Naruto grit his teeth. So far, he hadn't been able to touch Kakashi. He'd need to up the ante to keep Kakashi focused on himself. "This guy is good. I didn't even sense him until he spoke. I'll have to keep my senses on high alert. I might also need that jutsu." Despite his misgivings, Naruto maintained a confident front. "Talk all you like, Kakashi. I haven't shown everything yet. Wait till you see my real strength." He held Senbonzakura out in front of him vertically. "You did well enough against Senbonzakura in this form. Let's see how you handle this." Senbonzakura's blade lit up with seals that glowed with a pink light. Unlike with Mizuki, the blade stayed intact. Instead, motes of nearly black steel allow sand were unleashed. They poured into the air and formed a dense, glittering mass of razor-like blades that had a slightly pink tint when the light hit them right. The cloud glinted in the sunlight, lending a savage beauty to the sight. Naruto used his sword to guide the swarm of fragments towards Kakashi. The glittering dark cloud branched into tendrils that snapped towards the tree and engulfed it. Kakashi leapt away from the tree just before the petals of Senbonzakura reached him, and thus began a complex game of cat and mouse. Naruto would send the blade fragments at Kakashi, and he would dodge them. There were close calls, but Kakashi always escaped. Naruto never relented in his assault. Despite the fact that it looked like Kakashi was on his heels, his sensei had yet to go on offense, and all he had to show for it were a few minor scratches. "He's pretty good. Even without the Sharingan, he can dodge my blades," Naruto thought with grudging admiration. Kakashi was the one to break the stalemate. He spoke to Naruto while dodging a series of attacks on the surface of the nearby river. "You're good. I'll give you that, but you still aren't near my level," Kakashi lectured. Out of nowhere, he used a substitution to escape from Naruto's barrage and appeared crouched behind Naruto with his hands in the tiger seal. "You need quicker reflexes. Leaf Village Secret Finger Jutsu. 1,000 Years of Death." He shouted and shoved his fingers forward to try and poke Naruto, somewhere unpleasant. Naruto's lip curled in distaste. Kakashi must have thought very little of him to use such an attack and expect it to do something. It was time to show Kakashi a glimpse of his true skills. Hope this works. I still haven't mastered using this in combat. For a long while, he'd been working on his own original speed technique, a combination of a space-time jutsu and the body flicker. He wasn't anywhere near the level to use space-time jutsu like that, but he'd already started to learn to use the body flicker in combat without seals. So far, it worked 50% of the time. The other 50, he ended up running into a wall. Hopefully, it would work this time. In the split second before Kakashi's finger poke hit, Naruto's form flickered and then vanished. Kakashi was left in an uncomfortable position with his arms extended. In a strange reversal of roles, Naruto flickered back into being behind Kakashi, with his hands clasped together in the same seal Kakashi used. Fire style, Fireball Jutsu. A giant ball of yellow and orange flame billowed from his mouth and hit Kakashi at point-blank range. Whoosh! The log Kakashi had replaced himself was reduced to cinders in seconds. Damn! I can't get the drop on him. He just keeps anticipating me and dodging. That fact was a blow to his pride. He grunted in annoyance and dodged the pair of hands that emerged from the ground and tried to ensnare him. Kakashi emerged and they faced off once more. Naruto felt vindicated seeing the scorching on Kakashi's still slightly smoking jacket. It seemed he had gotten to him. There was no hint of the lazy Kakashi left as he said, "Looks like you took my advice about coming at me with the intent to kill. If that fire jutsu had hit, it would have done serious damage." His visible eye narrowed. "And that body flicker, I haven't seen someone use it like that in a while. Where do you learn all these things?" Naruto remained silent. He didn't need to give out any more information until the fight was over. Kakashi took his silence in stride. With a hint of his former lazy bravado, Kakashi said, "Oh well, don't tell me then. It doesn't change the fact that you won't get a bell. I told you, you alone can't beat me." Naruto had to withhold a smirk. He feigned anger for Kakashi's sake. "You can stop the mind games, Kakashi. I'm more than a match for you." He saw the flash of disappointment in Kakashi's eye. Clearly, he still thought Naruto was trying to get a bell alone. He can keep thinking that. It's about time we start the plan. He gathered the cloud of fragments in front of himself and sent them towards Kakashi in a solid wave. It would most likely be dodged, but hitting him wasn't the point. As soon as he knew Kakashi's view was obstructed, he created a clone and quickly had it dispel so it could send the signal to attack to his other clones. Now, the game begins. The Naruto clone that was with SASUKE had been waiting for a while. He could tell she was impatient to get to her part of the plan. They'd been watching the boss, and even if it was a little narcissistic, he couldn't help but admire the skills of the original. Boss is really going all out. Kakashi seems to be just about ready. Sure enough, after a particularly close call for Kakashi with a fireball jutsu, the clone stiffened as it received the memories of the clone the boss had created to signal the plan. Beside him, SASUKE took notice. "Is it time?" she asked eagerly. The clone nodded. "Good luck," it said. Without another word, it dispelled in a puff of smoke, sending the memories to the original. The memories of his clone hit him. It was time to enact the plan. Naruto took a momentary pause to collect himself. His lungs heaved lightly for air. Kakashi stood across from him. He looked completely fresh aside from his singed clothes. "You've been at this for some time. Perhaps you should give it a rest," Kakashi suggested. Naruto regarded Kakashi silently. His electric blue eyes were cold as glaciers. He slowly raised his katana. The methodical movement caused Kakashi tense and prepare for an attack. It wasn't. His intent wasn't to attack. The razor-like blades dispersed into iron sand and began to gather back into the seals along his sword's length. In the end, Naruto was left with a single blade as he stared coldly at his sensei. Kakashi looked at the blade with interest. "That really is an odd sword," he said. "Tell me, how is it you control that black powder?" Naruto smirked. "Come on, you should really know better by now. Do you really expect me to answer that?" Kakashi shrugged, as if to say, "It was worth a shot. I suppose it doesn't matter? Kakashi mused. Naruto looked at him sharply. You're going to fail anyways. As special as that sword is, it won't help you win. Have you realized that as well? Is that why you're stopping your attack? Naruto's eyebrows knit together in annoyance. Would this man ever stop nagging about quitting? He suddenly smiled at Kakashi rather nastily. He knew how to shut Kakashi up. His teammates were in place, and it was time to show Kakashi who he was dealing with. He began to perform hand seals at a blistering pace. Wind style, great breakthrough. A howling wind kicked up, and he directed it to Kakashi. It was strong enough to begin tearing up the ground. Kakashi muttered something to himself, but Naruto couldn't hear it over the noise of his technique. He did hear Kakashi's call to him as he kept his feet stuck to the ground using chakra. What's your plan? Blow the bells off my waist? Kakashi asked him derisively. I was thinking something more along the lines of burning them off. Naruto answered back, as Sasuke appeared above him with her hands clasped in a familiar seal. He took pleasure in the widening of Kakashi's eye when Sasuke let loose her impressive fireball jutsu. It engulfed his own jutsu, and the two techniques united to become a raging inferno of such intense heat that it sucked the moisture from the air. Sasuke landed next to him. There was a satisfied smirk on her face. You think that shook him up? The fire had died down, and only shifting smoke remained. Naruto frowned. There was no sign of Kakashi yet. Maybe stay on alert, he ordered. Sasuke grunted in annoyance. Their eyes flicked back and forth, searching for any hint of Kakashi's location. A faint sound reached Naruto's ears, one that barely registered, a slight shifting of earth. There! He reacted instantly. Channeling wind nature chakra to his palm, he thrust it forwards and shouted, Wind style, gale palm! A fierce gale burst forth and swept away the cloud of smoke and dust, the combination technique. In the gale's wake, it showed Kakashi stood there in the center, perfectly unscathed. From the small mound of upturned earth around Kakashi, Naruto deduced that he had protected himself with a few hastily constructed earth walls. Kakashi eyed them a bit testily. I'll give you this, he said, a slight exasperation straining his voice from the constant barrage of attacks. That now Sakura. Naruto cut Kakashi off mid-sentence. On all sides, a hail of simultaneous kunai and shuriken flew towards Kakashi, the deadly metal points seeking to dig into his flesh and draw blood. It forced him to do something he had avoided most of the fight: get in range for a taijutsu battle. Naruto and Sasuke were quick to capitalize. They moved in on Kakashi and began to bombard him with blows. 1 second he would catch a high kick from Naruto, and then the next he would be forced to let go and jump over a low sweep from Sasuke. The two also covered for each other. When he managed to land a blow that set one of them off balance, the other stepped up and kept him from pressing the advantage or escaping. It was like a dance for them. They'd been training together for so long, they didn't need words to communicate what they were going to do. Despite the fact that they were holding their own, Naruto felt frustrated. He could feel the seconds ticking by, almost like there was a giant clock in his head. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Each imaginary second drove him mad. Naruto finally took a chance and glanced at the clock on the training post, and his pulse quickened. They only had 5 more minutes. He caught Sasuke's eye and motioned to the clock with a jerk of his head. She glanced at it and gave him an understanding nod. The two broke away slightly. We have to end this now. It's time we play our trump card. I'll let myself get hit, and then you loosen the bells. I'll take care of the rest, he whispered to her. Sasuke nodded and grasped the handle of the blade at her lower back. Let's do it then, she said. In one smooth motion she unsheathed her tanto. They began racing towards Kakashi for one last clash. When they met the Jonin, Naruto went in slightly ahead of Sasuke. As they had planned, he allowed himself to be caught in the stomach with a strong kick, sending him flying backwards just before he did, though he managed to lightly touch the bells. With his goal complete, he twisted in midair, flipping backwards and landing softly in a crouch. Naruto clasped his hands into the ram seal and began to focus his magnet chakra on the bells. Sasuke followed soon after him and began to attack fiercely. She struck out with a leaping spinning heel kick, which Kakashi caught easily. Undeterred, she twisted gracefully and attempted to punch him. Kakashi just barely managed to catch her wrist. Still, she didn't give up. Sasuke went with Kakashi's latest counter by bringing her second foot around for what would have been a devastating blow. Luckily for Kakashi, he managed to transfer his grip of her right arm underneath his own and grip her legs with his hands. Sasuke smirked triumphantly. From beneath her left arm warmer, a kunai slipped into her palm. "What?" exclaimed Kakashi. She lashed out before Kakashi could do anything more than widen his eyes. A quick slash severed the bells and sent them tumbling towards the earth. In desperation, Kakashi tossed her away, but it was too late. As soon as the bells had been severed, Naruto stood and used his control to pull them towards him. The twin silver blurs zipped through the air and into his waiting grip. Sasuke spun elegantly in mid-air. She landed softly at Naruto's side. Sakura was quick to join them. She emerged from the bushes and dashed to Naruto's other side. Kakashi just stared at them blankly. "What just happened? How did you get the bells so fast?" he asked numbly. Naruto savored the shock in Kakashi's eye. He smirked and decided to enlighten his sensei. "When you magnetize metal, it tends to be very attractive," he said. Kakashi looked at him with befuddlement. It took a few seconds for him to connect the dots. His eyes widened. "You possess the magnet-style Kekkei Genkai. That gray stuff is some sort of metal powder," Kakashi said with comprehension. Naruto nodded. "That's right, Kakashi. You underestimated my blade and failed to comprehend its true nature. Just as I said it would be yesterday, underestimating us was your downfall," he told the older man. Kakashi nodded in understanding. He chuckled and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "I suppose you're right. Congratulations, Naruto, you pass," Kakashi told him, the corners eye crinkling merrily. Naruto wasn't fooled by Kakashi's cheerful attitude. There was something about his tone that set him on edge. Sasuke, too, seemed suspicious. Sakura was the only one that smiled back at Kakashi. "As for you too," a slight edge entered Kakashi's voice. His eye narrowed at Naruto's female teammates. "I'm afraid you two will be going back to the academy. You failed to get a bell, so you don't pass." Sasuke and Sakura gaped in shock. They began to protest vehemently, cursing Kakashi. None of it fazed him, he just stared at them apathetically. "Save it. You knew the rules. It's your own fault you let Naruto capture the bells in this little plan of yours," he said harshly. Naruto watched his teammates crumble. Sakura looked as if she had been physically struck. Tears welled in her eyes, and her head drooped sadly. Sasuke's expression was the hardest for Naruto. She looked at Kakashi with rage for a second, and then looked at him with an expression that he wasn't used to seeing. There was a desperation there, a plea for help that wrenched at his heart. He couldn't let her feel like that for even a second longer, so he gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry. I already told you, I won't let you fail," Naruto told her. Although it was meant for both of them, his eyes never left Sasuke's. Even if nobody else could tell, she was a lot more vulnerable than people knew. He then turned and looked at Kakashi fiercely. "I never said I would keep the bells for myself. The test isn't over yet. The bell hasn't rung," he said. Kakashi looked at him curiously. Sasuke and Sakura were an integral part of the plan, especially Sasuke. "I couldn't have completed it without them," Naruto explained. "Therefore," he looked at his two teammates, "I'm giving the bells to them." With a deft toss, he gave the bells to the two girls. His teammates numbly caught the bells he threw at them. Sasuke looked at him in shock. "Are you serious? You're just giving me the bell?" she asked. Naruto nodded, a small smile on his lips. "Like I said, even if it means I fail, I'll make sure you'll pass. You took a risk in going along with my plan, so it's only fair," he said. Sasuke nodded unsurely and gave him a grateful look. Naruto turned back to see his sensei studying him. "Well, Kakashi, what will it be? I might have gotten the bells, but Sakura and Sasuke now possess them. You either pass them as well or I'll refuse to be trained by you. It's your choice." Kakashi's eye narrowed dangerously. "Are you sure about that? Is all of you or none of you?" Are you really sure? He asked menacingly. Naruto met his glare with one of his own. He nodded resolutely. Kakashi turned to Sasuke and Sakura. And what of you two? You have the bells, so technically I have to pass you, he said. He glanced at Naruto. He, on the other hand, doesn't. I could just dump him back at the academy and train you too. What do you say? For a second, Naruto was actually afraid one of them would cave. Not so much Sasuke, but possibly Sakura. He didn't know if she would be able to pass up the opportunity to pass. To his relief, neither took the bait. Sakura bit her lip uncertainly, but ultimately shook her head no. Sasuke was the one that surprised him. She actually gave Kakashi a fierce glare and looked insulted. Not a chance, she growled. She looked at the ground and clenched her fists, then turned her piercing onyx eyes back to Kakashi. Naruto put a lot of faith in me. I'm not about to betray it. We all made a deal to work together, and these two have held up theirs, so there's no way I won't hold up mine, she declared. Yeah? Said Sakura, nodding much more surely, emboldened by Sasuke's reaction. Kakashi looked at all of them darkly. As you wish. The one-eyed Jonin performed a few hand seals. The sky darkened with thunder clouds, and lightning flashed across the sky. A fierce wind kicked up, and Kakashi loomed over them, tall and menacing. If it's all of you or none of you, then I have no choice but to say. Kakashi paused for dramatic effect and leaned forward menacingly. You pass, he said, rather anticlimactically. Naruto rolled his eyes. He thought that was a little overdramatic. His teammates blinked owlishly. Huh? Asked Sakura eloquently. Kakashi smiled at them. I said you pass. You see, out of all the teams I've tested, your group is the only one that has decided to go completely against my rules and work together to get the bells. You even managed to get them, something I never suspected. Kakashi told her cheerfully. Sakura nodded slowly. Kakashi turned to Naruto and narrowed his eye playfully. Though I suspect someone saw through a few of my plans. I couldn't help but notice that nobody seemed too hungry when I mentioned lunch. None of you listened when I told you not to eat. Did you? Naruto shrugged nonchalantly. Technically, you merely suggested we not eat. We simply declined to acquiesce, he said. Kakashi nodded understandingly. Very well. Then there's one more thing I want to do before we part ways. Follow me. I'm going to show you why I put such an emphasis on teamwork, he requested. Naruto nodded alongside his teammates, and they followed their sensei as he led them through the foliage and to a field adjacent to the third training ground where they took their test. There was a large circle of brick and mortar, their red and brown coloring standing out amongst the emerald green grass. But that wasn't the most eye-grabbing thing. No, the thing that caught Naruto's eye was the towering black stone in the shape similar to a kunai. He knew what it was and what it represented. His throat tightened slightly. The names of his parents lay on that stone. Kakashi led them to it and stopped on the side with the names carved into it. Do you three know what this is? Kakashi asked them. Naruto could tell his teammates weren't sure, but he nodded. It's a memorial for ninja that have fallen in the line of duty, he answered quietly. Kakashi nodded solemnly. Sasuke and Sakura looked at the stone with a newfound sadness in their eyes. Yes, it is. The names of my best friends are on this stone. Their names lie right next to my sensei's, he told them. Sakura looked at him wide-eyed. Sasuke and Naruto merely looked at the ground with dull eyes. Naruto knew that he and Sasuke were the ones that understood Kakashi's pain best. Kakashi looked at all of them with utter seriousness. In this ninja world, those who break the rules are scum. This is true. But those who would abandon their friends and teammates, well, they're even worse than scum in my books. I want you all to remember this place, and never forget to look after your friends and teammates. I didn't realize how much my teammates meant to me until it was too late. Don't make the same mistake, he told them sagely. They all nodded solemnly. Kakashi smiled cheerfully. Good. Now that all the serious stuff is out of the way, I was wondering if you'd answer some questions, Naruto? Naruto shrugged. I suppose you want to know about my jutsu? He guessed. Kakashi nodded sheepishly. Yes, I did. Could you explain to me how you used those jutsu of yours? I've never heard of a genin that had such excellent control over multiple elements before. I don't even know what that Rikujikoro you used was. He nodded. He didn't have a problem that. There wasn't much harm in telling Kakashi some of his secrets now. After all, he would need his guidance to advance farther. Sure, the secret is the shape manipulation. It's how I perform barrier ninjutsu so easily, like my six-rod light prison. His sensei gaped in surprise. Original barrier ninjutsu? How? He gasped. Naruto smirked. Well, I've done a lot of chakra theory study, especially yin and yang and their combined form. It also helps I've got a near-perfect grasp on shape manipulation, he said simply. Kakashi nodded dumbly. The silver-haired man shook himself from his stupor and chuckled in amusement. I have a feeling you're going to be an interesting group to teach. Congratulations on passing. Tomorrow we take our first mission as Team 7. Until then, see you later. Kakashi waved goodbye and disappeared in plume of smoke. In the relative silence following Kakashi's departure, Naruto felt his teammates' eyes on him. He turned to see them indeed staring at him intently. Would you like me to answer questions as well? He asked. Both nodded immediately. Naruto sighed. All right, come on. We might as well go and get something to eat. I'll answer some of the questions on the way, Naruto said, turning to begin walking to his favorite sushi restaurant. His teammates followed and began to ask him questions which he would answer as best as possible. Eventually, they began to discuss the test. To his surprise, Sasuke complimented him on his skills. She tended to hate doing that. I have to admit your plan was pretty good. I also noticed you seem to have been holding out on me more than you let on. Naruto smirked. Maybe, but I couldn't have gotten the bells without that last attack from you, he said. Sasuke smirked sideways at him. After a few moments, Naruto noticed that Sakura was hanging back slightly, a downcast expression on her face. Is something wrong, Sakura? He asked, surprising the girl. Sakura jumped slightly and looked down. Well, it's just that you two are so strong. You guys were amazing against Kakashi. Compared to you, I barely did anything, she said glumly. Naruto frowned. He didn't think there was any question that Sakura was the weakest of the three of them. He paused in his step and placed a hand on Sakura's shoulder to keep her in place. She looked up at him questioningly. He paused to consider how to say what he wanted to. If you really feel that way, then we can help you improve. Naruto saw Sasuke looking at him incredulously, but he gave her a pointed look until she backed down. The training would be hard, but we could get you stronger. I can't guarantee you'll be as strong as us, but you'll definitely be a cut above everyone else, he told her. So, do you want to improve? Sakura, to her credit, didn't hesitate for long. She gave him a determined nod, a fire entering her jade-green eyes. Yes, she answered firmly. Good, we'll talk to Kakashi about it tomorrow. Sakura smiled gratefully at him. Thanks, Naruto, she said sincerely. Naruto waved her thanks off. It's not a very big deal. After all, we're teammates, and they were. That day, a bond had begun to be formed, one that would unite the team for years to come. Chapter 15. Journey to the Land of Waves. The first real mission. Naruto, alongside his sensei and Sasuke, stood off to the side as they watched Sakura training her medical skills. She performed a swift set of hand seals, and her hands were enveloped in a whirring green miasma of chakra. Sakura held them over a large, dead-looking trout on the table before her. Her brow was knit together in severe concentration. Come on, just one more time. Breath, you stupid fish, Sakura panted. Naruto's practiced. I caught the slight twitch of the trout's tail. An instant later, the fish's mouth and gills began to gape as it flopped around madly. Sakura smiled in success. Kakashi clapped lightly at the accomplishment. Very good, Sakura. You've come a long way in 2 months. That only took 15 seconds, he said. Naruto nodded in agreement. Indeed, Naruto was impressed with her determination, not only in perfecting the jutsu, but in building all her skills. Sakura's reserves had nearly tripled in the short time they had been a team, and Kakashi had even begun to teach her about elemental jutsu. Sakura looked at Sasuke shyly. What about you, Sasuke? Do you think I've gotten better? she asked. I guess you're not quite as useless as before. But you're still the weakest link, Sasuke answered dismissively. Sakura's expression fell for a fleeting second, but she was smiling again a second later. Oh well, guess I just have to train harder, she declared. Kakashi smiled at her. That's the spirit, Kakashi said encouragingly. He then looked at them with his one eye curled in amusement and cleared his throat. When he was sure they were paying attention, he spoke. Now, in light of Sakura's most recent accomplishment, I've got a bit of a surprise for you all, he said. They looked at him intently. I think it's time we took a C-rank mission, Kakashi told them. Naruto and his teammates reacted with joy. Sakura gave a big, yay, and Sasuke smirked eagerly. Naruto himself felt as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Finally, no more chores. They had been performing D-rank missions, or as he liked to call them, daily time wasters, at least once a day since they had become a team. The D-ranks were dull, dreary work, and each task had begun to erode away Naruto's patience. I don't know what you're so excited about. It's not like you're going to find any challenge in a C-rank. I doubt you'll even find someone worth killing on one of those. Ninetales complained. Naruto rolled his eyes. Not everybody is as bloodthirsty as you. Besides, it's better than sitting around the village and doing manual labor. Naruto shot back. Kurama grunted in agreement. Anyways, why don't you all go home and wash up? I'll meet you in front of the mission assignment building at 2 o'clock, Kakashi commanded. He gave a cheery wave goodbye, and then disappeared in a large cloud of smoke. Well, see you in a bit, said Sakura cheerfully. She turned and dashed away. That left just Naruto and Sasuke. I suppose we should leave too. I guess I'll see you at the meeting hall, he said. Sasuke nodded in agreement. See you later, she said. With that, she turned to begin walking towards her home at a sedate pace. As she left, Naruto heard her mutter, "Finally, a real mission. I was getting tired of all the chores." He watched her disappear into the foliage, and then made his own exit by disappearing in a flicker of speed. After taking a quick shower and eating lunch at Ichiraka's ramen, Naruto was the first to arrive outside the building that held the mission assignment desk. His teammates arrived shortly after, and after their sensei joined them, Naruto led the team into the room beyond the entrance, a large woodline space with a quaint feel to it. The word for shinobi was painted in a giant black kanji on the ceiling, with two stick-like lights on either side, to light the room when the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows wasn't sufficient. On their way to the desk, the team passed a small sliding door to the right. Sitting at a long table situated in front of one of those rows of windows was the Hokage and several other ninjas, one of which was Irika. Naruto gave Irika a slight nod, which he returned. The table in front of them was piled with mission scrolls. Naruto bowed politely to his grandfather figure alongside his teammates. The Hokage smiled at them warmly. "Ah, Team 7. Are you here for your daily mission?" he asked pleasantly. Kakashi shook his head in the negative. "Not exactly, Lord Hokage. Remember our conversation about my team taking on more difficult missions?" he questioned. Hiruzen's mouth formed into a silent "ah." "Are you sure they're ready for a C-ranked mission this early, Kakashi?" he asked Kakashi as he sized them up with calculating gaze. The silver-haired jonin nodded without hesitation, and muttering quickly broke out amongst the other ninja assigning missions. Naruto stood calm and collected while he was being scrutinized by Gramps. Well, more like his teammates were being scrutinized. Apparently, the old man was impressed with what he saw. Very well," he said. The other shinobi at the table looked at him as if he had grown a second head. Irika in particular seemed uncertain. He was looking at Sakura with worry. Are you sure that's a good idea, Lord Third?" he asked hesitantly. The Hokage arched one of his grizzled white eyebrows at the man. "I mean, don't you think they should have a bit more time to improve their skills?" Irika clarified. Naruto looked at Irika sharply and silently pleaded for the man to cease his worrying. He finally had a chance to move beyond the tedious chores that were D-ranks, and he didn't want it to be messed up. "I swear, even if I am fond of him, if Irika-sensei costs me this chance, I'm going to use him as a practice dummy for my next jutsu," Naruto thought frustratedly to himself. Kurama snickered in amusement. Luckily, both for him and Irika, the Hokage didn't seem swayed by the objection. He waved Irika off and said, "I'm confident that these three can handle themselves on a more advanced mission." Irika still didn't seem completely convinced, nor did all the other mission assigners. The Hokage ignored them and scanned the pile of C-rank mission scrolls before him. Naruto watched with hungry eyes. Hiruzen hummed in thought, and then plucked a scroll from the pile. "This should do for a first time," he said. He handed the scroll to one of his helpers, who recorded the mission and who it was assigned to. When the helper was finished, he handed Kakashi a copy of the scroll. The silver-haired man read it while the Hokage briefly explained the mission. The mission is a routine protection mission. Your client is a highly respected bridge builder from the Land of Waves. You'll be escorting him home and then guarding him as he finishes his latest bridge. There shouldn't be too much trouble." He told them. Yes, it seems simple enough," Kakashi agreed. "We'll accept the mission," he said as he rolled up the scroll. Hiruzen nodded with a smile. Good. Then I'll bring him in now," he said. He raised his voice and called out, "Bring in Mr. Tsunade." Naruto's head turned to the door they had passed on their way in. It led to a small room where clients would wait for their mission to be chosen. There was a shuffling on the opposite side, and a moment later it slid open with a clack, and an elderly man stepped into the doorway. His appearance was not what Naruto had been expecting. The man had gray hair, with a big beard and dark eyes behind his spectacles. A rope was tied around his forehead, and his clothes were worn from hard work. Clutched in his hand was a small drinking gourd, and from the strong smell of alcohol wafting from it, it was full of sake. Tsunade had obviously had more than a bit of the drink, because he had to lean on the doorway for support. What's this?" he asked with a slur. His voice was gruff and surly. "I thought I ordered ninja, not a group of snot-nosed brats and a scarecrow babysitting them," Tsunade complained. Naruto looked at the man coldly. Beside him, he could feel Sasuke bristle angrily, not that he could blame her. In just the one sentence, Tsunade had managed to both belittle and insult her, two things Sasuke hated. It would be impressive if it wasn't so foolish. Kakashi, who didn't seem affected Tsunade's words, tried to smooth things over. "I can assure you, Mr. Tsunade, my students are far more than capable of protecting you. Even if they're not, I'll be there as well, so there's no need to worry," he said placatingly with one of his eye smiles. Tsunade grunted, unimpressed. He took another swig of sake and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "They had better be," he grumbled. The bridge builder glared at them. "All right, listen up, you brats. I paid good money for this mission, so I don't care if two of you re nothing but a couple of wimpy girls and some pretty boy with a tin sword. I expect you to protect me with your lives." Tsunade's rude demand left Naruto severely irritated, and his teammates pissed off. Sasuke made to lunge at the man, and Naruto had to hold her back with a calming hand on her shoulder. She shot him a withering glare, but he ignored it. "Calm down. We can't attack a client," he reasoned. She growled in annoyance. Naruto patted her shoulder reassuringly and whispered so only she could hear, "I know how you feel, but it isn't worth the trouble. Besides, you shouldn't care what an old drunk thinks." Sasuke snorted in amusement. She gave him a grudging nod of agreement. He glanced at Kakashi, who gave him a grateful tilt of the head. Kakashi cleared his throat awkwardly. "Anyways, Mr. Tsunade, we'll meet you at the main gate at 8 o'clock tomorrow. That is, if you still want our protection," said Kakashi. The bridge builder heaved a great sigh, but ultimately nodded. I'll take your protection." With that, he turned and left the way he came. The team was left alone save for the Hokage and his assistants. Kakashi turned to them with a surprisingly serious look in his eye. It was unusual for him to take anything seriously. "All right, as I just told Tsunade, we'll be leaving at 8 o'clock. I'll expect you to be packed and ready. Make sure you have supplies for at least a month. Is that understood?" Naruto and his teammates nodded. Kakashi smiled at them. "Good. Then I'll see you all bright and early tomorrow," he said. After that, the team began to make their way out of the mission hall. At the entrance, they split off and went their separate ways. Kakashi and Sakura went to the right, towards their downtown apartment and family home, respectively. Sasuke continued straight ahead in the direction of her apartment. Naruto himself turned to the left and made his way back to his own apartment. There was a pit of excitement in his stomach. Tomorrow he would finally get a new mission. The next morning the team met up at the village's main gates. To Naruto's surprise, even Kakashi was on time. He was waiting for them off to the side of the gates, chatting with the client. When they approached, he looked up and smiled. "Good, you're all here," he said brightly. Kakashi stopped to examine them before they departed. Once he had determined that all three of them had the supplies they needed, Sakura and Sasuke in their packs, and Naruto in his storage seals, the group set out on their journey. They arranged themselves around the bridge builder in a diamond formation, with Sasuke at the head, Kakashi in the back, and Sakura and himself on either side. Naruto found the trek quite pleasant. The sun shone brightly overhead, and a pleasant breeze kept them cool. They were surrounded on both sides of the path by the serene forests that made up the Land of Fire. Due to Tsunade, they were forced to travel at a slower speed than they usually would. It would take them just over a day to reach the southern coast of the Land of Fire, where they would catch a boat to Tsunade's homeland. Everything was rather uneventful and seemed to be going well. That is, until Naruto spotted something odd down the road. They were crossing a sturdy wooden bridge over one of the many murmuring creeks that crisscrossed the countryside, when he noticed a puddle of water in the road ahead. A puddle when it hadn't rained for weeks? Not likely. Naruto immediately stretched out his senses, and to his alarm, he found 2 Chunin-level chakra signatures in the puddle. A trap. He quickly turned to Kakashi and opened his mouth to warn him. To his surprise, he found that Kakashi had noticed the puddle as well and was watching it out of the corner of his eye. He turned his gaze from it for just long enough to give Naruto a subtle shake of the head. Naruto understood the silent order. Don't do anything. His every instinct was screaming at him to prepare for an attack, but he forced it down and waited for the inevitable. It didn't take very long. As soon as Kakashi had passed by the puddle, they attacked. 2 black-haired men rose from the puddle like silent wraiths and rushed Kakashi. They were dressed in brownish-gray camouflage, with rebreathers covering their mouths, and strange horned forehead protectors, with 2 massive, clawed gauntlets on their left and right hands respectively. A chain made of shurikens snaked from their gauntlets, and wrapped Kakashi within its barbed grasp. With one sharp tug, Kakashi appeared to be torn to pieces. Blood and body segments littered the earth. One little piggy down for to go. One of them cackled maliciously. The 2 continued their fierce charge towards the group. Naruto felt like cursing. He could recognize their attackers easily from the bingo book, the Demon Brothers. He reacted in a split second and ignored the carnage he had just witnessed. While his teammates were still shaken by Kakashi's apparent death, Naruto quickly began to bark orders. "Sakura, quick, protect Tsunade. Take him underground if you have to. Sasuke, with me." His words snapped his teammates out of their shock, and they immediately scrambled to follow his orders. With Sasuke by his side, Naruto rushed to meet the Demon Brothers' charge. Sasuke launched a kunai and a shuriken at the chain. They flew with expert accuracy and pinned their chain to a tree. Naruto and Sasuke rushed in to take advantage while the brothers were tugging at the chain in a vain attempt to free it. Naruto took the brother with the single horn on his forehead protector, Gozu, if he remembered correctly. He launched a devastating kick at the man's jaw. It landed with crushing force and forced him to release the chain from his gauntlet, lest his arm be ripped out of his socket. Gozu managed to use the momentum from Naruto's kick to roll himself into a crouch. "Quick, get the bridge builder," he ordered his brother, who was in a similar position. They made another mad dash for Tsunade, but this time Naruto was more prepared. With a few hand seals, 2 crackling yellow energy ropes were created in his hands. Crawling rope. Naruto deftly threw the ropes at the brothers, who were too surprised to avoid them. The ropes wound around them and brought them to a skidding halt face first. A tense silence settled over the road. With his adrenaline pumping, Naruto cautiously approached the 2 brothers. "Damn it! What the hell is this jutsu?" cursed the brother with the 2 horns. Meizu. He and his brother were squirming to get out of their bindings. Naruto looked at them with an emotionless expression. You can stop struggling. My crawling rope barrier blocks off your chakra, so there's no escape, he said teasingly. Slowly, the brothers' struggling died down. They settled for glaring at him impotently. Sakura and Sasuke moved to join him. Together, the three stared down at the brothers. Nice job incapacitating them, Kakashi complimented. As he popped up behind them, Naruto simply rose an eyebrow at his theatrics. Sakura, on the other hand, gaped in surprise. I see you're still alive, Sasuke said coldly. Geez, you almost sound disappointed, Kakashi said jokingly. Sakura growled and slapped him on the arm. Don't scare us like that, sensei. If you were still alive, why didn't you help? She asked angrily. Kakashi shrugged nonchalantly. I knew you guys could handle it. He turned to Tsunade with a serious look in his eye. Besides, I had to figure out who their target was, he said seriously. Naruto's eyes narrowed as well. They had gone straight for the bridge builder. Something about this job was off and he didn't like it. Tsunade shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. What are you talking about? He asked nervously. Kakashi started to glare harshly. I had to know if they were after us, and not unlikely, considering that we have some high-profile members on our team. Or you, he explained. Naruto put the pieces together, even as Kakashi voiced what he was thinking. You lied when you applied for this mission, Mr. Tsunade. You asked for simple protection from robbers and highwaymen. Now explain why there are ninja after you, or I'll end the mission right here, Kakashi said threateningly. Tsunade's shoulders slumped and he heaved a great sigh. I suppose I've got no choice, he said resignedly. He told them of his country's struggle, how they were under the thumb of a business magnate named Gato. Naruto's lip curled in disgust at the name. His grandfather had a decent information network when he was alive. Naruto had heard of Gato. The man dealt in drug and slave trafficking in secret, while pretending to be a legitimate businessman. Tsunade also explained what his bridge would mean for the country, and how Gato wanted to kill him so he would finally have an ironclad grip on the land of waves. By the time he was done, the entire team was frowning deeply, and Tsunade was looking at them pleadingly. I'm sorry, Mr. Tsunade, but I can't take my team on this mission. With this information, it has clearly escalated to an A-rank mission. That's something they're not ready for yet, Kakashi said regretfully. Tsunade's pleading expression fell. I understand, he said softly. Naruto frowned. He didn't feel right just abandoning the mission. Leaving Gato to roam free in the land of waves didn't sit right with him. Let's not be so hasty, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said calmly. Kakashi gave him a look that clearly said, continue. Naruto pressed on. We both know that with you and me on the mission, the chances of success are virtually guaranteed. It's not right to just leave the country defenseless, he told him. Kakashi nodded reluctantly. What are you suggesting, that we disregard protocol and continue? He asked. Naruto shook his head. No, I'm saying that we ask permission. I'm sure Gramps wouldn't be averse to some sort of deal. We have to send word to have a team of Umbu come and pick up the Demon Brothers anyway, so why not also ask for permission to continue the mission as well? Naruto reasoned. Sakura and Sasuke voiced their agreement, and Kakashi placed his chin in his hand and thought the idea over. Finally, he relented with a large sigh. Fine, it's late afternoon anyways. It'll start to get dark soon, so we might as well make camp and wait for the Umbu to arrive. Kakashi quickly bit his thumb and summoned one of his ninja dogs, a pug by the name of Pakin. He was sent off with a scroll for the Hokage, requesting for the retrieval of the brothers and permission to continue the mission. After he had sent off his summon, Kakashi began to tie up the demon brothers with actual ninja wires. When he was done, he slung them over his shoulders. All right, let's go make camp, he ordered. When they made camp, the team chose a spot next to a river with good visibility. To their back was the river itself, full of crystal clear water with a rock-lined bottom. On the other side of the river was a plain that continued until it met a set of mountains. To the north and south were the banks of the river, a wide open area that stretched into the distance. Finally, there was the only conceivable way for someone to sneak up on them, the forest to the front, and Naruto had taken care of that by placing clones transformed to look like ordinary rocks at random spots in a 50-yard radius around camp. After the spot was chosen and the defenses put in place, they set up the camp proper. The bedrolls were rolled out and put into place around a smokeless fire Sakura and Sasuke built out of carefully selected materials, and a small fire jutsu. Naruto was sitting in front of the fire with his eyes closed. He was waiting for any information to arrive from his clones on lookout, and keeping an eye on the demon brothers, who were unconscious and tied to a tree on the edge of the camp. Naruto could suddenly feel someone looking at him. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Tsunade?" he asked without turning around. Tsunade gasped in surprise. "How did you know it was me?" questioned Tsunade in astonishment. Naruto chuckled at Tsunade's obliviousness. "Sakura and Sasuke are out hunting for our dinner, and Kakashi is in a tree nearby reading his smut. That leaves only you," Naruto explained. Luckily, Tsunade didn't pick up on it. "Oh," the bridge builder said blankly. Naruto heard a rustle of cloth as Tsunade sat down across from him. There was silence. Naruto could tell the man wanted to ask him something, and he had a pretty good idea what. Finally, Tsunade broke his silence. "Tell me, why did you convince the others to continue the mission? I could tell that they were ready to end it. Your sensei wanted to follow protocol, and that pink-haired teammate of yours was uncertain until you spoke. And don't even get me started on that moody girl. I can tell she didn't give two shits about our country. So tell me, what makes you different?" Tsunade asked seriously. Naruto frowned at the man's description of Sasuke, but couldn't really refute it. He wanted to defend her, explain what she had been through to become like that. But he knew it wasn't his place. Instead, he settled for answering the man's question. "It's like I told Kakashi. It wouldn't be right to just let Gato run roughshod over your country. Don't get me wrong, I don't particularly care about you personally, at least not beyond the mission. You should not have lied. The Hokage is a very reasonable man. He would have struck an agreement with you for some alternative form of compensation," Naruto said sternly. Tsunade's head dropped in shame. Naruto saw his look of remorse and relented slightly. "Be that as it may, like I said, I know what kind of man Gato is." Naruto's eyes grew cold, and he glared into the fire. "He is a man possessed by greed. His hunger for money is insatiable, and he will do anything to feed that hunger. Anyone who gets in his way is killed in the most brutal and humiliating manner he can think of. Gato is the worst kind of scum, and the world would be better off without his filth. Someone needs to deal with him permanently," Naruto said darkly. Tsunade shivered at his tone. He took an unsteady swig of alcohol to calm his nerves. "You know, for a kid so young, you sure seem comfortable with the idea of killing. It's pretty unnerving if you ask me." Naruto wore an emotionless mask. His eyes were tracking the writhing tongues of flame in the fire. "Unlike my teammates I've already killed. It was long ago in self-defense. I've had a lot of time to reconcile that part of shinobi life," he said softly. He didn't relish the idea of killing people, but he knew it was a reality of their profession. That was something he had to recon with after killing that hidden cloud shinobi on accident. Not to mention, if his grandfather's theories turned out to be right, it would be kill or be killed for him eventually. After that, they didn't speak anymore. Soon enough, Sakura and Sasuke had returned with several dead rabbits, and Naruto took the duty of cooking them. He deftly skinned and cleaned the rabbits, and then put them on spits to roast over the fire. Not long after he had begun to cook the meat, Naruto suddenly got a rush of memories from one of his outermost clones. A flash of images, including a group of ninja in gray vests and bone-white animal masks. His head suddenly snapped in the direction of the forest, and he stared into the trees intently. His teammates noticed his reaction and tensed in preparation to defend themselves. "What is it, Naruto? Did one of your clones see something?" Kakashi asked warily. Naruto nodded calmly. "Yes, one of the clones furthest out spotted the Umbu team we sent for. There's 4 of them. They're being led by a cat-masked female Umbu with purple hair. They should be here in less than a minute," he replied. Everyone relaxed and prepared to meet their visitors. Nine Tails, can you sense anything from them? Anything that might suggest they're not Umbu? Inside his head, he heard a grunt. Can't you do anything by yourself, brat? The fox groused. Nevertheless, he answered Naruto's question. There's no negative emotions coming from them, so I'd guess they're real. Naruto nodded silently at the fox's assessment and focused back on his team. While he had been conversing with Kurama, Kakashi stroked his chin in thought. Sounds like Yugao and her team. Good, said Kakashi, relieved. True to Naruto's prediction, the four Umbu arrived in less than a minute. They first appeared as shadows flitting in between the trees. When they alighted in the clearing, they landed swiftly and silently. The leader, Yugao, approached Kakashi and bowed her head respectfully. Kakashi chuckled and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. No need to bow to me, Yugao. I'm no longer your captain. It's good to see you, he said. Yugao straightened up and nodded. It's good to see you too, Captain. There was a hint of teasing in her voice. Kakashi gave her a disgruntled look, but otherwise ignored the jab. While he was watching the byplay between Kakashi and his apparent former subordinate, Naruto noticed that in the background Yugao's team was securing the demon brothers. Yugao glanced back at the brothers as her subordinates called out to her. Prisoners secured, ma'am, a rabbit-masked Umbu said. Yugao nodded in acknowledgement. Very well, prepare to transport them. We'll be leaving momentarily, she commanded. The rabbit-masked man nodded. Yugao turned back to Kakashi, pulled out a scroll from her pouch. Lord Hokage received your request and has agreed to allow you to continue the mission, with the condition that Mr. Tsunade reimburse the leaf for the price of 2 A-rank missions, in compensation for his deception. You're allowed to do anything you deem necessary to protect Tsunade and the Land of Waves, including and up to removing Gato and his foothold in Wave. There are a few other things, but you'll find them all in the scroll, Yugao explained. Kakashi took the scroll and nodded sedately. I assume by remove, you mean assassinate Gato and his army of thugs? He asked dryly. Yugao nodded. I don't have an issue with it. What about you, Mr. Tsunade? Tsunade nodded rapidly. He looked ecstatic, like he couldn't believe what was happening. Yes, of course I'll agree. Any price is worth finally being out from under Gato's thumb, he agreed. Very well. I'll inform Lord Hokage of your agreement. I wish you all luck on your mission, said Yugao. She looked specifically at Naruto and his teammates. No doubt she was questioning why the Hokage was allowing them on such a dangerous mission. Naruto couldn't blame her. Yugao motioned to her team to move out, and just like they arrived, they left. Silent like shadows flitting amongst the trees, Naruto returned to the fire and finished cooking the rabbits. The meal was what you'd expect of a camp dinner. The food wasn't anything elaborate, but it was tasty and filling. After dinner, they set up guard shifts. With Sakura settling in for her shift on guard duty, the rest of them went to bed. Naruto woke the team up as soon as he saw the sun began to rise. Once everyone was awake, they quickly packed up and erased all signs of their presence there, and then departed. The closer they got to the ocean, the cooler the air got. By the time they had arrived at the shore where they were to meet their boatman, goosebumps had risen on Naruto's arms from the cold. He peered intently into the mist that hung over the water. Through the mist, he could make out the hazy form of a worn wooden skiff being rowed into shore. The man rowing was a rugged-looking middle-aged man. He wore a hat similar to Tsunade. After the man beached the skiff on the shore, Tsunade went up and greeted him. Thank you for doing this. I know it's a risk, he said gratefully. The man nodded silently and motioned for them to get in the skiff. Everyone piled in quickly. The boatman used his oar to push the skiff off of the shore and into the gentle waters of the channel that separated the mainland from the Land of Waves. The tide was calm and allowed the skiff to cleave through the water swiftly. A hulking shape loomed in the mist ahead of them. It took Naruto a moment to realize what it was. Towering above them was a massive half-finished bridge made of concrete, bigger than any bridge he'd ever seen. A massive crane and skeletal platforms of scaffolding towered over it. They passed within an arm's reach of concrete pilings the thickness of a maple tree. Their boatman guided the skiff through a stone-lined tunnel and into a small harbor. When they exited the tunnel, the mist was clear for the first time that morning, and Naruto got his first look at the land of waves. There were several mangrove trees growing out of the seawater. The buildings looked worn down, with roofs made of rough wooden shingles, and their paint was faded. Their guide pulled up to a beat-up dock next to a closed-down shop and let them off. Tsunade thanked the man once more, and then the boatman quickly hurried off. Once he was gone, Tsunade turned to them and said gruffly, "All right, my house is only about an hour's walk from here. I expect you to get me there safely." Kakashi nodded in understanding. He took the lead and led them into the forest outside of the apparently deserted town. Everything was fine for a little while. The sun was out and shining, but it was still cool. But Naruto noticed something strange. The animals had stopped making noise. That put him on guard. Animals only went quiet in the presence of a predator. He surreptitiously looked at his surroundings. Out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw a movement. In a flash, he had a kunai in his hand. "What is it? Did you see something?" Kakashi asked quickly. They had come to a standstill as the ninja's eyes began to dart about. Naruto shook his head. "No, there's something off," he replied. Kakashi nodded in understanding and put his book away. His eye traveled lazily around the clearing. It finally locked on to a bush on the left side of the path. With precision, he whipped out a kunai and sent it hurtling into the bushes. They waited for something to happen. For a second, Naruto wondered whether he had imagined everything. That doubt died when a terrified white rabbit came racing out of the bushes a few tense moments later. Sakura and Sasuke began to relax their guards, but Naruto and Kakashi met each other's eyes. "Kakashi," Naruto said in concern. The Jonin nodded. The rabbit was a snow hare. Its fur only turned white in winter. With it being late spring, there was only one reason a rabbit would have a coat like that still. It was raised inside. "I know. Prepare yourselves, we're about to—" Kakashi stopped abruptly and shouted, "Get down!" They obeyed, and not a second too soon. Just as they hit the deck, a massive cleaver sword came cutting through the air. The huge blade continued on over their heads and cleaved halfway through the trunk of a tree before becoming stuck. A large black-haired man, with white bandages tied tightly around his lower face, appeared like a ghost and landed softly on the sword's long hilt. The man looked over his shoulder and glared at them with cold, menacing brown eyes. For squiggly lines on his sideways forehead protector marked his allegiance. The long cloth of his headband fluttered in the breeze. His back, which was facing them, was bare save for a belt to strap his huge blade to. He wore pinstriped shinobi pants, with matching camouflage arm and leg warmers. Naruto recognized the man immediately. He had been in the bingo books Gramps Sarutobi gave him for as long as he could remember. Kakashi strolled forward with his hands in his pockets. Well, Zabuza Momochi, missing ninja from the mist," he said casually. Naruto tensed when he saw Kakashi reach for the headband pulled down over his left eye. "I suppose I'll need this if we'll be fighting you." Kakashi Hatake of the Sharingan. "Hand over the old man," Zabuza demanded. Sasuke tensed on the other side of Tsunade. Naruto could only imagine what was going through her head. "Quick, Manji formation. I want you to protect the bridge builder," Kakashi ordered them. The three genin quickly moved in front of Tsunade in a protective formation. Naruto gripped the hilt of Senbonzakura tightly in preparation to draw it. Kakashi slowly pulled his forehead protector up onto his forehead and opened his Sharingan eye. Zabuza saw the eye and turned to face them fully. "The Sharingan. I'll get to see it in battle. It's an honor." Sakura gave Naruto and Sasuke a confused look. "The Sharingan is the bloodline of the Uchiha clan, right?" Sasuke nodded sharply. Sakura stared at the back of Kakashi's head. "Then how come Sensei has one? And what exactly does it do?" Sasuke didn't answer. She still seemed too shocked by the revelation of Kakashi's Sharingan to speak, so Naruto answered for her. "Kakashi's eye is implanted. As for what it does, the Sharingan allows the user to comprehend and copy any technique that they see their opponent use. But that's just what's commonly known. There's much more to its power than that," he explained. Zabuza looked at him appraisingly. That's right, boy. That I can perceive any technique and then copy it perfectly, said Zabuza. As for you, Kakashi, back in the mist, we had orders to kill you on sight. Our bingo book said you were the man who copied 1,000 jutsu. Kakashi, the copy ninja. The two jonin stared each other down. Mist began to gather in the air once more. Slowly, killing intent began to leak from Zabuza. It washed over them in potent waves. Naruto easily shrugged it off. It was nothing compared to his grandfather or Kurama for that matter. Sakura and Sasuke weren't so lucky. They began to sweat under the heavy pressure. I think we've talked enough. You're obviously not going to give the old man up, so I'll kill you and those brats. And then I'll take the bridge builder's head. Zabuza crouched down and ripped his sword from the tree. He vanished in a burst of speed and reappeared on top of the water. His sword was strapped to his back, and his hands were held in to half ram seals, one at chest level and one held above his head. Ninja art. Hidden mist jutsu. Zabuza cried.
Hello, if you are here and want more seasons, don't forget to give your comment asking for the next season. So, bye bye.